We've got some visual representations here of the first thing we're going to discuss, which is a new Australian web series.
It certainly is.
Bruce. It's a convict comedy, and we're all taught in school, in high school in Australia, about our convict past, and we get this representation that really, I think, is so abstract now. And this show, actually, it's a 10-minute web series. Each episode is around 10 minutes. And it really shows us the convict life in a really brutal fashion. I mean, a lot of the humour comes from the brutality of the times.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting setup because they don't, as I said, they don't shy away from any of the detail of that, and it's quite graphic and brutal. And there's a lot of illicit sex and murder.
Sex is really well done.
Absolutely, and hangings, and they even deal with engagement with the indigenous inhabitants in the region in a really complicated, interesting way. I think. But underpinning all of that is clearly a largely improvised approach to the dialogue, which they've clearly, I assume, have put together a lot on location, and it's this wacky buddy comedy set between Richard Davies and Angus Sampson, who people probably know from Fargo, largely reprising his role from Fargo. It must be said, if there are Academy Awards from grunting, he's going to be right up there, and I do like him. He has a finite range, but
he's got a specific thing going on.
He does, but he's good, and he's kind of the dramatic anchor around Richard Davies and the other sidekick, and it's really a series about the three of them and the relationship between the three. I think because it's clearly improvised, the dialogue doesn't always work, and I did struggle in particular with the first 2 or 3 episodes. It really takes a while to find its rhythm, and they're very short. And I did struggle with it until about episode 4, and then I really found myself enjoying it a lot more. The dialogue isn't great often, as are some of the minor roles, but I think there's an unwritten rule in comedy that even if the writing and the directing isn't as good as it should be, if you have that chemistry and that charisma between your leads, you can kind of get away with it. And I think the premise is so bold, and the chemistry is really good between the three of them that it works. Yeah,
it was created by Warwick Holt, Matt Blackwell, and Tony Rogers. Tony Rogers is the director. Warwick and Matt are the writers. And they spent a lot of time developing this. I think they've spent like 8 years developing it, and they were developing it for television.
Right. Yeah.
And then finally, when it just wasn't getting off the ground for television,
they did it themselves.
Well, they noticed that there was some funding going on from Film Victoria and Screen Australia for a web series. So they refashioned it for that. And so it's come out as a web series, and it's an interesting platform for this.
Well, and especially in the Australian market, I think this is increasingly common in the American and European market, where the independent video on demand market is a lot more embedded than Australia. So again, I think it's a really bold move by them to put it out there, and I certainly wish them the best.
Yeah, and it's so well produced, actually.
Yeah, well,
I think we've come past this thing of like a web series is going to feel cheap. This does not feel cheap. I mean, look at the images behind us. This has all the costumes, it has all the dirt, it has all the makeup, and it certainly has the cast. This is a professional cast. It's a professional production. It's a fully funded professional production that just happily has been funded as a gift, essentially, by the Australian government and these creatives to everyone. No one has to buy a ticket to see this. No one has to...
No, you can watch it on your phone on the way home.
Yeah, you can literally watch it. Yeah, you go to brucetheseries.com is how you find it.
Yes, and it also has a quite sophisticated score. The editing is really good.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right. It's a proper piece of television, and I think we live in a world now where independently produced web series, you're absolutely right, are not the shoestring underground series that they were even 3 or 4 years ago.
Although hopefully, for this to survive, it continually, if it needed to go to a second season or wanted to go to a second season, it would require more funding. Do you see what I mean? It is literally...
That's true.
There is no financial incentive for this to go on. It is not making money. It is a fully funded product.
Clearly costs some money.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the style of the humour because it's interesting because, I mean, we've been there before in terms of using the brutality of ancient times as a way of getting laughs, particularly with the Monty Python films, like Life of Brian and Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
You know, it's about the whoring and the disgusting and the rat eating and the dirt and the grime and the filth and the disease. But even those Monty Python films, they were playing up the characters a bit. There were still funny voices and still funny walks.
Yeah.
And I think what's so distinctive about this series is just how deadpan it is and how straight they play it and how much the lines are allowed to breathe.
Yes, and the whole thing is very self-consciously delivered in a very contemporary Australian vernacular.
Yeah, the Australian
as
vernacular,
well.
that's right.
And they even make sort of anachronistic references to suburban life in Australia, and that's clearly intentional. So yes, there's this quite impressive period of detail, but they're not attempting a purist approach to the kind of dramatic scenarios at play. I think that's very intentional. And I think that works really, really well. Yeah. And that allows the three of them to clearly develop on the set as they were shooting them what's ultimately a very likeable energy between the three leads.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it too.
Yeah, no, I did. It crept up on me.
When you think about things like For the Term of His Natural Life, which was, the big, I guess, miniseries, it's been made, the movie versions have been made about it as well.
Yeah.
Or when you think about the kind of depictions of convict life and, colonial life in Australia that we used to see as sort of mini documentaries in high school or in museums, and they look so clean, they don't look, this looks better, this looks grubbier and realer than those things that were ostensibly meant to be real.
Absolutely, and it's also very refreshing because, again, they're very self-serious usually, the way that we are fed culturally and historically this period in our history. For the right reasons, it's a horrific, brutal period of our history, and they somehow elicit this really consistently funny, comedic, character-driven banter out of this horrific scenario. And I think the way that they deal with early engagement with the Indigenous population is particularly clever, and we could talk about that for hours and we won't, but and really funny as well.
Yeah. So go check it out. We recommend you watch this. It's called Bruce, and you can find it brucetheseries.com. It's free. There's seven episodes.
Yep,
and
series one.
you can just get it, watch it however you wish.
To watch that, watch this.